It is Anything Goes Friday today. For me, that meant a denim shirt and a puggle. His name is George Bailey. He's the happiest dog in town. I talked about Senate races. You're a good boy. I talked about Senate races yesterday, some of the key Senate races we should be watching. And I want to run through some of the legislative races, some of the states where chambers are, in fact, up for deciding in this election. And I would say, we spend so much of our attention, and it's important, of course. We spend so much of our attention on the presidential race. But recognize that the delta between Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, heck, the delta between Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden, not only is that much less than the difference between any of those people and Donald Trump, but it's also less than the difference between having lines drawn by Democrats versus lines drawn by Republicans, or lines drawn by nonpartisan commissions than lines drawn by right-wing strategists in the next post-census line drawing that's going to happen in every state around the country. It's critical. You can make a similar case around the U.S. Senate. Let me run through some of those legislative chambers. And if people have their favorite sources for this stuff or their favorite ways to go help, you can send that in. You can tweet at us at Thom_Hartmann. You can tweet at me at Jefferson D. Smith. But I just know that as we think about how we spend our time and energy, if you go and devote yourself to a swing district state legislative race, you can have a meaningful impact. That thing's going to be decided by maybe 150 votes. It's going to make Florida look like, in 2000, look like kind of a more decisive election. These races are close because these districts are small. I remember in the state of Oregon back in 2000, that Republicans held a strong majority, big majority in the state house. I think it was 35-25, as I recall, 35 Republicans, 25 Democrats. But the number of votes that was in all of if you looked at the closest districts in the election that just preceded that 35-25, I think it was 1,400 votes. That if you flipped 1,400 votes, that all of a sudden it'd be 31-29 Democrats. And what that would mean, and what that does mean, is then those lines, not only does that mean that education spending, that child services spending, that healthcare spending, the decisions that states make, presidents don't do that. Congress doesn't do most of that. States do that stuff. Not only does it mean those decisions with real human impacts are made with sort of democracy and humanity in mind, but it also means that the line drawing is done differently. So let me run through some of those. The Colorado State Senate, Democrats hold by 3 votes. They need to hold that. Arizona House of Representatives, this is a big one. Arizona, one of the biggest battlegrounds in 2020. Republicans hold the House of Representatives by 2 seats. It would only take a pickup of 2 seats for Democrats to take over the Arizona House of Representatives. The Iowa House of Representatives, if Democrats pick up 6 seats in Iowa, they can pick that up. Kentucky, it would take a pickup of 20 seats, but all 100 seats are available. So if there were a landslide, if there were a sweep in Kentucky, even Kentucky could have a Democratic House. The Maine State Senate is close. Maine, of course, Susan Collins is there. It is an enormous battleground for that reason. Democrats hold the state Senate by 7 seats, and all 35 seats are up. In Michigan, a big state, of course, for the presidential campaign. It was the governor of Michigan that gave the response in the State of the Union address that we talked about the other day. Got a nice note from a friend thinking that we should, in fact, enact a couple of the ideas that I put out there about how to do a response to the State of the Union. I liked that idea of actually trying to do that. But in Michigan, Republicans control the House of Representatives by 6 votes. In Minnesota, Republicans control the state Senate by 3 seats. But again, in Michigan, all 110 seats are open. If Democrats win the legislature there, all they have to do is win a bare majority. They control the House of Representatives in Michigan. Same story in Minnesota. 67 state Senate seats up. Democrats need to pick up 3. In Nevada and New Hampshire, the Democrats have a relatively thin margin. They need to hold North Carolina. Only a few more, don't worry. I know it can be tricky going through a list, but I want us to learn this stuff and be able to talk about it. One of the things I wanted to get done before the week was out. In North Carolina, another huge battleground state, This is, again, the biggest argument for a candidate who can do well in North Carolina, for the folks in this show who aren't big Biden fans, and I hear what you're saying. I hear where you're coming from. The best argument I've heard for Biden, I'm not here to plug him. Best argument I've heard for him is his strength in North Carolina, ability to help beat Thom Tillis, and then help in the North Carolina State Senate and a North Carolina State House, where Republicans hold relatively thin majorities in both places. You could turn North Carolina into a trifecta for Democrats. That is a quick rundown. If we engage ourselves with elections where we can have a real delta, where the dark money is not going to flow in the hundreds of millions, but instead just in the millions, where races don't themselves, race by race, don't cost $1 billion the way I suspect this presidential race is going to cost, whether or not Bloomberg is the nominee, in races where the races are, $100,000, real expensive ones, maybe $1 million, the cheaper ones, maybe $25,000. These cheaper races, you can really have a huge impact.